Could Cyprus and the European Union be at the front line of a new Middle East war? Throughout 2024, the island of Cyprus, the EU's most easterly member, has come to international attention as it's led efforts to provide aid to Gaza. However, as the risk of a new conflict grows on the Lebanese-Israeli border, a war that could again see the island at the centre of humanitarian aid efforts, Cyprus has suddenly faced threats of attack from the Iranian-backed Hezbollah militia. So, just what exactly lies behind this worrying new development? Hello and welcome. If you're new to the channel, my name is James Ker-Lindsay, and here I take an informed look at international relations, conflict, security and statehood. In international relations, some countries find themselves caught in a particularly complex and challenging political environment. Sitting across distinct regions or geopolitical blocs, they must often navigate between competing actors and demands. This can lead to tensions between different foreign policy objectives, or even between national goals and the objectives of their partners and allies. One of the most interesting contemporary examples is Cyprus. Having built strong ties to the Middle East over many decades, in recent years it's emerged as the European Union's outpost in the region. But while it's become a vital element of broader humanitarian operations in the area, it's now coming under threat of attack through other aspects of its foreign policy. The Republic of Cyprus lies at the far eastern end of the Mediterranean. Its closest neighbours are Turkey, roughly 65 kilometres or 40 miles to its north, and Syria, around 100 kilometres or 60 miles to its east. Lebanon and Israel are to its southeast, and Egypt to its south. Its nearest EU neighbour, Greece, lies 400 kilometres to its west. The island is around 9,300 square kilometres or 3,600 square miles. However, since the Turkish invasion in 1974, it's been divided, with roughly 36% beyond the effective control of the internationally recognised government. Additionally, Britain retains 2 military bases on the island, totalling around 99 square miles or 260 square kilometres. Cyprus has an exceptionally rich history straddling Europe and the Middle East. First settled at least 12,000 years ago, the island's initial Greek inhabitants are believed to have arrived around 4,000 years ago during the Bronze Age. Over the following millennia, the island fell under the rule of almost every major civilization that controlled the eastern Mediterranean. Having been conquered by the army of Alexander the Great, it was ruled by Egypt until it became part of the Roman Empire in 58 BC. When this split in the 4th century AD, Cyprus became part of the Eastern or Byzantine Empire, suffering regular Arab-Islamic raids from the 7th to the 10th centuries. During the Third Crusade in the 12th century, Richard the Lionheart conquered the island before selling it on to the Knights Templar. It then passed to the Lusignan kings of Jerusalem, who held it for 300 years until it was seized by the Venetian Republic in 1489. 80 years later, in 1571, the Ottoman Empire conquered the island. This lasted until 1878, when Cyprus came under British colonial control. In 1955, the Greek Cypriot community, comprising almost 80% of the island's inhabitants, launched an uprising to end British rule and unite the island with Greece. However, the Turkish Cypriots, who made up roughly a fifth of the population, opposed this, preferring instead to see the island divided between Greece and Turkey. As tensions escalated between the communities, fears grew that NATO allies Greece and Turkey would be dragged into the situation. As a result, Athens and Ankara eventually decided that Cyprus should instead become an independent state. The Greek and Turkish Cypriots would share power, and Greece, Turkey and Britain would guarantee the new state's independence, with a right of unilateral military intervention if necessary. As all three so-called guarantor powers were NATO members, many expected Cyprus to also join the alliance. However, in a rare point of agreement between the Greek Cypriots and Turkey, it stayed out. As the Greek Cypriots saw it, NATO would always favour Turkey. Meanwhile, Ankara believed that NATO would try to stop it from intervening if any problems ever arose. Instead, under the leadership of its first president, Archbishop Macarius, the new republic instead became part of the non-aligned movement, bringing together countries that rejected the confrontation between the West and the Soviet bloc during the Cold War. Its members included many leading Arab states, such as Egypt, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and Saudi Arabia. As a result, the new Cypriot state soon began to forge close ties to its Middle Eastern neighbours. However, having become independent in 1960, the defining factor shaping Cyprus's broader regional relations came with the breakdown of the constitution just 3 years later in 1963. Although the United Nations established a peacekeeping force on the island and began peacemaking efforts, tensions continued, and in July 1974, following a coup sponsored by the military government in Greece, Turkey invaded, taking control of just over a third of the island. The invasion would not only have profound internal effects, but would also cement Cyprus's foreign policy, as many Greek Cypriots blamed NATO and the United States for failing to stop Turkey. Anti-Western sentiment grew, thus strengthening the country's ties to the non-aligned movement. At the same time as the issue increasingly went before the United Nations, Cyprus saw its Arab neighbours as a valuable voting bloc in its favour, especially as they also distrusted Turkey, which by now had built strong ties not only to the West, but also to Israel. Over the following decades, Cyprus's relations with the Arab Middle East steadily strengthened. As the civil war raged in the 1980s, the island became a sanctuary for those fleeing the conflict. It also became an important base for many businesses working across the region. Meanwhile, Cyprus's relationship with Israel remained poor. While the Cypriot government wanted to avoid antagonising its Arab neighbours, many ordinary Greek Cypriots were fiercely pro-Palestinian. At the same time, Israel placed its close alliance with Turkey, one of the few Muslim-majority countries that recognised it, far above any relations with Cyprus. Occasionally, this deep mistrust even led to tensions, such as when Cyprus jailed 2 Israelis for spying in 1998. After decades of having built up close relations with the Arab world, everything appeared to change in 2004 when Cyprus joined the European Union. Naturally, many now expected it to shift its focus away from the Middle East. Aside from having to leave the non-aligned movement as a condition of EU membership, Cyprus now gained the backing of over 24 European partners. However, while Cyprus steadily became more integrated into Europe, any sense that it could isolate itself from the Middle East was rapidly disproven. This was highlighted in 2006 when war broke out in southern Lebanon between Israel and the Iranian-backed Hezbollah militia. As tens of thousands of foreigners fled, Cyprus became the centre of a massive international evacuation effort. And it was at that moment that the island's value as a hub for EU humanitarian and crisis management in the Middle East was firmly cemented. This has again come to the fore with the war in Gaza. Working with the EU, the US and various other partners, the Cypriot government set up the Cyprus Maritime Corridor. This has provided vital assistance to almost 2 million people affected by the fighting. Meanwhile, as tensions now grow again between Israel and Hezbollah on the Lebanese border, Cyprus is again preparing to handle what could be the region's next war. So, if Cyprus has become a significant hub for humanitarian relief to the region and has traditionally had close ties to the Arab world, what's led to the threats from Hezbollah? To answer this, we need to step back a little. After decades of secular pro-Western rule, in 2002, Turkey elected a new religiously oriented government under the leadership of Recep Tayyip Erdogan. From the start, Erdogan attempted to build ties between Turkey and Arab and wider Muslim countries and became an increasingly vocal supporter of the Palestinian cause. As a result, the previously strong relationship between Turkey and Israel steadily deteriorated, and in 2010, ties collapsed when Israeli commandos raided a Turkish ship carrying aid to the Palestinians, leading to the deaths of 10 Turkish aid workers. And it was at this point that relations between Cyprus and Israel improved dramatically. Following the discovery of natural gas deposits in the eastern Mediterranean, the two countries signed a maritime boundary agreement. With Israel no longer tied to Ankara, and as Cyprus moved in a more pro-Western direction under a new president, high-level contacts quickly grew, leading to bilateral agreements across various areas. Crucially, they also began to build their military cooperation. This was highlighted in May 2023 when the Cyprus National Guard and Israeli Defence Forces staged a major joint exercise on the island. Widely understood to simulate a war against Hezbollah in Lebanon, it also provided the opportunity for Israeli warplanes to operate from an unfamiliar airbase. It's against this backdrop that Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, issued his warning on the 19th of June that if Cyprus allowed Israel to use its airports or bases to attack Lebanon, it would be considered a part of the war. A threat many observers interpreted to mean the possibility of Hezbollah missile or drone attacks against the island. Naturally, the comments prompted a strong reaction from the Cypriot government and its EU partners. Responding to the warning, the Cypriot President Nikos Christodoulidis insisted that Cyprus was not involved in planning for military conflicts in any way whatsoever. Meanwhile, as EU leaders issued a statement condemning threats against a fellow member and underscoring their solidarity with Cyprus, European officials insisted that any attack against Cyprus would be an attack against the rest of the Union. Likewise, it seems almost certain that the EU will have made it very clear to Iran, Hezbollah's patron, that a strike against Cyprus will carry very serious consequences. In the meantime, Cyprus also appears to have been trying to defuse the threats in its own way. As well as its own contacts with Tehran, it was noted that the EU statement didn't specifically name Hezbollah, a move Cypriot officials insist was deliberately designed not to escalate tensions. More to the point, and in an interesting other development, the Cypriot government has suggested that Nasrallah's comments weren't in fact aimed against the Republic. Instead, they were directed at the British military bases on the island. This is certainly possible. After all, they've long been key to Western military operations in the Middle East, including recent strikes against Houthi rebels in Yemen. However, given the recent military exercises between Cypriot and Israeli forces, it would nevertheless appear that Cyprus was in fact the primary target. Of course, all this raises the question of whether Cyprus's close ties to Israel are becoming a problem for the country, not only in terms of becoming a target for Hezbollah, but also potentially disrupting its ability to play a humanitarian role in the wider Middle East. In some senses, the answer would be no. For a start, the Cypriot government would argue that there's no contradiction between the two roles. Good working relations with Israel don't stop it from being a humanitarian hub. Indeed, many would argue that it helps to have such strong ties to the Israeli government. Moreover, Nicosia would also point out that while its relationship with Israel has undoubtedly improved over the past decade, it still maintains very close ties with many Arab countries. In addition to excellent relations with neighbouring Egypt, it has increasingly close contacts with many of the Gulf Arab states. This was highlighted in May when the Emir of Qatar paid an official visit to Cyprus. On top of this, many would point out that Cyprus is still seen by many across the region as a safe and welcoming neutral territory. Many Israelis and Lebanese, amongst others, have been buying property on the island as a bolt hole from the growing regional uncertainty. Nevertheless, recent events have highlighted the foreign policy complexities facing countries sitting on geopolitical fault lines. On the one hand, Cyprus has become an invaluable part of EU efforts to play a humanitarian role in the region, but at the same time, its close bilateral relationship with Israel now seemingly puts the country at risk. To this extent, one wonders whether current developments might start to prompt questions about the direction of Cyprus's foreign policy and whether some sort of recalibration is perhaps needed. In the meantime, all this has underscored the degree to which Cyprus has now made the EU a frontline actor in the Middle East. I hope you found that useful. If so, here are some more videos that you might find interesting. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.